I'm a history buff, like I know a lot of you are if you watch the show. We're doing a thing of the history of Missouri. We're going to do it one county at a time. We call it Show Me Missouri. We're going to travel to all 114 counties of the state. We'll have a member of the Farm Bureau, county elected officials, some of your state legislators you see here on the show. We're going to talk about the history, what's happening now in the county, and how the two are interconnected. It's a passion project of mine. If you like history, I hope you'll get involved. Follow us, go to MissouriTimes.com. You can see it. We'll probably branch it off into its own social media at some point. But you've been so good to us at the Missouri Times, the show, different papers. This is a passion project that I hope you'll enjoy. It's called Show Me Missouri, the history of Missouri, one county at a time. The first county was Polk County. We had a great time. And we hope you'll go to MissouriTimes.com, find a little bit about it. And if you like the history of the state, I hope you'll enjoy it. Thanks a lot.
Good morning and welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics. I'm Brittany Robbins, filling in with Scott Fawn. Joining me this week is State Representative Deb Lavender, always the most prepared person in the room and the hardest working person in the Capitol. Deb, you're new to the show. Welcome. You're also running for Senate in the 15th District against Senator Koenig. Tell me why you decided to run.
I am. Well, thank you so much for having me this morning. I have been had the opportunity to serve for 3 terms now. I'm a physical therapist by trade and still own a small outpatient practice in Kirkwood. And after this session, I woke up to realize what we are doing as policy in Missouri. On the House floor this year, we passed guns to be on college campuses. Our governor signed a bill that bans abortion with no exceptions for rape or incest, and we continuously underfund education in the state. 20 counties in Missouri go to school 4 days a week because they don't have enough money for buses for the 5th day. Last week, a report came out that 50% of the kids in our state are not scoring at proficiency in math or English. And those are the reasons that I've chosen to run for state senate. I think I can make a difference. I think the issues I've worked for my career, healthcare, public education, common sense gun measures, I think those are the values in this Senate district, and that's why I've chosen to run for state senate.
Public policy is important, so are the numbers in politics, the fundraising, and you have outraised your candidate. Republicans have said that that seat is a top priority in 2020. He's also a member of the well-funded conservative caucus.
Yes, he is.
What is your plan to offset that 6 or 7 figure group with strong investments? It's going to back that candidate.
Well, one of the things that I've had the opportunity to do over my years is to get skilled at running a campaign. I do the time, I sit and I make call time, I do the work that's required to have the funding. If you're not going to fund your campaign, you're not going to win. And so we're doing what we need to do for that. I'm amazed at how generous people are. I've had over 800 donors since I've announced for Senate campaign. I've raised more than $200,000. So we're excited about that opportunity. We're already attending events in the district. We're making phone calls into the district. We're starting to knock on some doors. So we're preparing to do all the work that we need to do to win this race.
Now, sticking to numbers, but moving on to the budget, as you sit on budget, this is something that you know well. Earlier this month, an appeals court ruled in favor of corrections officers.
Right.
$113 million in back pay they're owed, plus 9% interest. It's going to hit taxpayers in Missouri with a $125 million tab.
Right.
Democrats, argue that we are on the slow road to Kansas.
Right.
What does that mean
to Kansas.
for this?
We have made corporate tax cuts and tax cuts in Missouri that are equitable to what Kansas has done. The difference is they did theirs all in a moment, and we've spread ours out over 6 to 8 years. So as a state, we've lost over $500 million per year in revenue to pay for services in our state. And so as I've mentioned, we're not funding education well. We're not funding healthcare well. People who live with physical disabilities in this state have had their services cut to the degree that they're having challenges, physical challenges, with their well-being, getting up in the morning, getting back into bed at night, because they rely on attendance to help them do that. And we're not funding that well. This year, for the first time, we've cut $20 million from people with developmental disabilities. First time in a long time that we have a waiting list for people to get residential or in-home care if you're developmentally disabled. We could talk about roads, We could talk about bridges. We could talk about our employees are the poorest employees paid in the nation. We don't pay public defenders well, so we have people sitting in jail without having their due time in court to see if they're even guilty of what they're accused of. The first step in getting in front of a judge. So we have needs that aren't being served. And the suit that was settled last week, the appeal that went in the security officers' favors at the Department of Correction, $125 million. We have other lawsuits. Nurses are now suing for Department of Correction for the same thing, that we haven't given them back pay. And we've got, we have lawsuits coming through for discrimination in employment from the Department of Corrections as well. So we've got some lawsuits coming at us that I think in the end will be $150 to $200 million. And we just don't have those reserves right now because of these budget cuts.
Looking to next year in the budget, how big of a factor will that be?
Well, I think it's a big factor. I've done some work in some fund balances that we have, and I think there's money available to us, but because it's so in the weeds and there's really nobody accountable for this fund balance, people don't know what to do with this money. We have more than $3 billion sitting in reserve accounts all over every department we have, but there's not one person that's in charge of the whole kit and caboodle, so we're not doing anything with those monies.
Speaking of the budget and savings, Medicaid expansion is certainly something that could do that. Groups are working to get that on the ballot next year. Speaker Har recently said that expanding Medicaid would be a blowhole to the budget. I know you disagree. Tell me why.
I do. WashU has recently done a study that shows expanding Medicaid is going to be cost neutral or maybe even save us money. Right now, the federal government pays us 60 cents on a dollar for Medicaid. When we expand, they'll pay us 90 cents on that same dollar. So not only can we provide health care for 200,000 of our neighbors, we can do it in a cost-effective manner that doesn't cost the state money and may indeed actually save us some money.
Aside from the state budget, providers are feeling the burden with pressures from uncompensated care. This is something you know about.
Oh, and we've closed hospitals across the state and in rural areas. That's what amazes me the most as we work here in St. Louis. We have access to free clinics here for people at a higher percentage rate than we do in rural areas. Rural areas are having to travel up to an hour for emergency care. And that's just untenable for people who live in those areas.
Deb, as we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to add about your Senate race, how he'd be a contrast to your opponent? He's sometimes seen, or is seen, as extremely far to the right. That conservative caucus can be viewed as disruptive. Others have viewed you as extremely far to the left. How will you be different in working with your colleagues in the Senate?
And I think being portrayed as being far to the left, some of my social policies might be more progressive, but I think you'll find me to be one of the most conservative in the budget area. I look at where we're spending money. Just because we have a good idea doesn't mean that we have the money to pay for it. And you've pointed out there are those extremes. My opponent is the author of the bill banning abortions. My opponent is wanting to take $50 million out of public education to put onto school vouchers. My opponent voted for open carry in the streets of Missouri. And those are the issues and the contrast that I think this district is looking for, and I think that's what's going to make the difference for my campaign.
Well, I know Kirkwoodians will be looking forward to those lavender yard signs before they know it. Thank you so much for joining us. We have to pay Scott's bills. We'll be right back after these messages for our opinion maker panel. We have a legend in the house this week. We'll be right back.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association.
Your energy needs are changing. That's why at Ameren Missouri, we're not waiting on the future. We're building it with the Smart Energy Plan, advancing thousands of projects across the state, helping reduce emissions through cleaner energy sources, boost reliability with self-healing equipment, and better withstand storms with new composite poles. Moving Missouri forward and bringing us all a little closer together. That's energy at work. Ameren, Missouri.
I'm a history buff, like I know a lot of you are if you watch the show. We're doing a thing of the history of Missouri. We're going to do it one county at a time. We call it Show Me Missouri. We're going to travel to all 114 counties of the state. We'll have a member of the Farm Bureau, county elected officials, some of your state legislators you see here on the show. We're going to talk about the history, what's happening now in the county, and how the two are interconnected. It's a passion project of mine. If you like history, I hope you'll get involved. Follow us. Go to MissouriTimes.com. You can see it. We'll probably branch it off into its own social media at some point. But you've been so good to us at the Missouri Times, the show, different papers. This is a passion project that I hope you'll enjoy. It's called Show Me Missouri, the history of Missouri, one county at a time. The first county was Polk County. We had a great time. And we hope you'll go to MissouriTimes.com, find a little bit about it. And if you like the history of the state, I hope you'll enjoy it. Thanks a lot.
And welcome back. You're watching This Week in Missouri Politics. I'm Brittany Robbins, filling in for Scott Fawn. Welcome to our opinion maker panel. We have a legend in the house today. Pat Thomas, treasurer of the Republican State Party. Cassie Grewing, one of the hardest working people behind the scenes. You're like the Dwayne Wade of monitoring.
Well, thank you.
Welcome to the show. State Representative Tracy McCreery.
Thank you.
And Councilwoman Lisa Clancy. Full disclosure, you are my councilwoman.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah,
Mine too.
I know that. So starting this week, Senator Laughlin's Committee on Tax Efficiency and Reform met. Cassie, I know you attended. Some are arguing that the tax credit system across the board is too weak. What was the biggest takeaway?
I think the biggest takeaway within the committee is just evaluating all of the tax credits. There's arguments on every aspect for every single one as of the need for them and to continue them, but where do you draw the line to continue each and every single one? So I think that it was a big takeaway this week in the correct steps to evaluate each of them and to be able to review and open up discussion on what they're for and just overall review.
Sure. Pat, tax policy, tax credits, something debated every year in both chambers and the Senate. Do you think that this committee is going to move any needles, change the debate at all?
Well, I think it's always good to take time in the interim when you can actually delve into things a little more deeply and actually see some results where committee times and hearings are so much more just crammed during session. I think they're going to come out with some good initiatives and some good talking points and some good points. I think it'll be interesting to see if when you throw those out on the floor of either the House or the Senate, how those items can actually move themselves when they get put up against other issues that are going to be hot issues of the day.
Mm-hmm. I think one thing to come out of the committee is that when you total up all the tax credits in the state, it's something like $3 billion. Mm-hmm. Some stuff obviously is maybe a little bit wasteful in there, but not the shelter tax.
Right, exactly. And what gets lost in this debate about tax credits sometimes is there's different kinds of tax credits. And there's a large category of tax credits that we refer to as benevolent tax credits. And one that I think is very important for the state, both our urban, suburban, and rural areas, is the domestic violence shelter tax credit. As we know, it can be harder to fundraise to keep shelters open in rural areas. And I think this domestic violence shelter tax credit is one that is very, very important to all areas of Missouri.
And not just the debate in the state, but also regionally, low income.
Yeah, I'll be paying attention especially to the discussion around the low-income housing tax credits. We have not had that program since 2016 here in Missouri, and there are over 100,000 people in the state that are on waiting lists right now for affordable housing. And we know that that's had a large impact for people here in St. Louis County, as well as in other parts of the state, and is part of why I have a bill right now before the County Council to establish an affordable housing trust fund to try to cover some of those gaps and ensure that everyone has a decent, safe, quality place to live.
Gaming committee also met yesterday. You attended. What's a big thing to come out of that for all the lobbyists at home watching?
The big takeaway, I would say, is everybody is advocating definitely on behalf of their clients, and there is work possibly for a compromise, but definitely still huge talks, huge steps, and trying to figure out what to do with everything as a whole to be able to provide taxes for the state or be able to each have a position and a place of who gets to participate.
Sure. Looking to 2020, Medicaid expansion, we talked a little bit to Representative Lavender about this. Groups are working to get it on the ballot. This would move the poverty level up to 138%. Republicans in Jeff City are against it. We're talking about giving access to health care to working Missourians.
Exactly. Well, and I'm so glad you mentioned Jefferson City, because only in Jefferson City is something like Medicaid expansion a partisan issue. When I'm out talking to people that identify as Republicans, they think this makes good fiscal sense. We as Missourians are paying $1 billion into Washington, D.C. for tax money that is not coming back to help us with health care. So I believe that by expanding Medicaid and helping people that are working, they're basically the working poor. They work full time but still just make about $18,000 a year and don't get insurance through their employer. So Medicaid expansion would do exactly what we say we want to do as elected officials, which is give people the tools they need to help pull themselves up by their own bootstraps.
Pat, Representative McCreery just mentioned that federal match, the 90% drawdown that is currently 60%, that could create a significant amount of savings for the state. Republicans aren't having it. Is this just strictly a partisan issue, or is there a real case to be made that there isn't a savings?
Well, I think there's a budget case to be made, is what I really hear from people, not just in Jefferson City, but around the state as well, is the budget case is, right now it's a 90-10 match. Nobody's sure how long that the federal government is going to provide that amount of money. And there's only two large pools of money we could go to make up a difference. And those are education and social services. And unless we have a specific way to fund the mechanism, I'm not sure what we do if we get in a budget tight punch.
Sure. Cassie, you've covered a gazillion of these hearings over the last couple of years. 37 states now have expanded. A significant amount of governors in those states are Republicans. Do you see any wiggle room on this? Do you see anyone coming around the corner? Should the ballot initiative not go the way of Democrats?
I can see both sides of the argument. I know that based off of the 90 and 10% match, that it's a projected savings of, $7.6 billion in tax revenue by, 2022? So I can see where the cost savings and everything like that is coming through, but then the sustainability of it as well. We are paying into a system that we're not receiving anything back or our full benefits back in, but like Pat stated, if it doesn't sustain itself, then where do we pull from? Education and social services.
Sure. Lisa, what are you hearing from your constituents? How do you feel this issue impacts your district?
Well, my constituents, I think, are frustrated that this hasn't been able to get done in Jefferson City. And I think one of the reasons my constituents are becoming more and more invested in local government is because we're doing some really good things across party lines. I think this is an important issue we need to get done. I'm sensitive to some of the implications and short and long-term consequences that people are talking about, but it's really concerning that we've seen hospital closures across the state, and I think there's some pretty big consequences to that too that we need to take into consideration.
Something like 8 rural hospitals.
So I've signed the petition already, and I hope that we can get this across the finish line.
Tracy, you kick your campaign off, I think, in 2 weeks. As you talk to voters on this issue, what's the reason to vote yes to expand?
Well, I think, like the councilwoman said, voters are very frustrated that there's not been action taken in Jefferson City. So I think it's time to let the voters decide, let their voices be heard. This is about providing quality, affordable health care to people, but it will also boost the economy and also help keep rural hospitals open. So let the voters decide.
Sure. Looking to this November, there are, I believe, 6 open house seats up for special election. 6 here in Missouri. There's 77, something like that, nationwide. Most of them are safe. One that's sort of a toss-up, House District 99.
Correct.
Gene Evans' old seat. What do you think happens there?
Well, that race truly is a toss-up, but I think the momentum is on the side of the Democrat, Trish Gunby. She has had an amazing response at the doors. She's been going door to door. She's doing everything she needs to do. But more importantly, I think that these races like this in these 50-50 districts are a litmus test as far as, this Missouri has super Republican majorities in both chambers, and I think this race is going to be, in the 99th, is going to be a litmus test for how the voters feel about the Republican agenda.
Sure. Pat, so you are familiar with this conversation well. Gene Evans was seen as a moderate. This political landscape is extremely polarizing right now. Is there room in Jefferson City anymore for a pragmatic moderate to be successful?
I think there's definitely room, but I'd like to see there to be room for more. I think we often find ourselves butting heads, and the problem is we don't get things done because people aren't willing to actually sit and listen. And I think that goes across the spectrum, and sometimes what they say on the political campaign trail to get elected is fine, but once we get them to Jefferson City, it would be nice if everybody could sit down and listen to people's real concerns, work together, and see if there is something we couldn't do for the betterment of Missourians.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Lisa, what's the climate like in St. Louis?
A lot of my constituents are really excited about the race in the 99th and about Trish Gunby. She's doing a lot of things that it seems like she should be doing to be a strong candidate, so we'll see what happens in November. I think people, St. Louis County has been through a lot in the past couple of years, particularly this year, with our former county executive now in prison and a big transition. And I think, people in St. Louis County are ready to move on from that, pick up the pieces, and get some good things done for St. Louis County that hasn't been possible in a couple of years because of the corruption that we saw in the previous administration. So, that's something that my colleagues and I on the council take very seriously, and we are very committed to working together as a team to be able to make things like that happen.
There are going to be a lot of grandstanding in the House. Do you think in this political climate it's possible to reach a moderate middle?
I really do, and I'm honored to be on the panel this morning with Pat. I think that it's possible to disagree on issues, but you can do it in an agreeable way, and I think that there are a lot of people in Jefferson City that want to get things done for their voters, and we just have to work really, really hard to maintain relationships, build bridges, and focus on the things that we can all agree on.
Cassie, you talk to a lot of people behind the scenes. Is the political rhetoric we're seeing, is it grandstanding? Or do you think even in 2020, in the election year, people will come together, be able to get things done?
I hope that people are able to come together and get things done. I think that I would almost argue in a sense that everybody has the same goal, but how they want to get there, I think, is different. So I think that that's just finding a middle ground and a compromise on how to get things accomplished.
Sure. Looking to the governor's race, Auditor Galloway recently said or called on legislators, I believe, for more policy concerning these self-deleting text message apps. You sort of followed suit.
So I'm working on some legislation right now for us to ban those in St. Louis County. And that comes at the heels of Governor Galloway's call for that. Working on it right now. I don't have a bill ready quite yet, but I think it's important, again, given everything that's happened in St. Louis County and even in our state this year, voters need every assurance, residents need every assurance that government is being conducted in an open, transparent, good government way. And so I think this is an important piece of that.
Is that a step in restoring some of the faith that constituents have in government?
I think Mike Parson himself has gone a long way to restoring the faith. He's been out there, he's been engaging with people. He and his wife travel the state. I mean, I can't imagine the miles and the hours. But I just think having that personal touch is equally as important. And I think he's doing that.
Tracy, you want to weigh in on the governor's race, 2020?
Well, I think Auditor Galloway, who is the Democratic candidate for governor, is doing a great job. She had an amazing hire this week. I think she hired one of the best campaign managers in the country, Chris Sloan. He is the best. He's fresh off of a big win in Nevada. He knows how to work in states like Missouri, and I think he's going to help push us over the finish line next November.
Sure. Cassie, you want to weigh in on the governor's race for 2020?
I think I'm an advocate for Parsons. I think that he's doing a good job, and I think that just within the realm and the arena that he stepped in of just on the heels of Greitens in just the grassroots and the camaraderie, and I think that he's been very diligent about working on both sides of the aisle.
Sure. Do you think it's more about now Missouri being more of a red state, or do you think there's an opportunity for a real race next year?
I think that there's an opportunity. I would like to say that there's an opportunity every year for a race. It's the strongest candidate, and you never know how people are going to vote.
Pat, do you think that Auditor Galloway has a shot?
No,
That's simple, huh? You're not going to elaborate?
not going to go there.
Okay, as we move to who won the week, Tracy, who won the week?
Well, I think Auditor Galloway won the week. She's putting together an amazing team, and most importantly, she's showing Missouri voters that we don't have to continue to do things the way we've been doing them, that there's a fresh new way to do things.
Lisa?
Labor. So yesterday, the county executive signed a piece of legislation to uphold prevailing wage in St. Louis County on county projects receiving county money. And so I think that's a big win. Again, this was something that 6 of 7 of us on the county council worked together across party lines to co-sponsor. I was one of them. And I'm hopeful about, hopefully we'll see a good resolution soon related to the UAW strike. I know that some big investments were promised if that gets across the finish line by GM into the Winsville plant. So hopeful about that.
Sure. We have about 3 more minutes. Pat, who won the week?
Melissa Crandall, Fordland R3 school teacher. School teacher of the year. Webster County, she's been teaching for over 20 years. She won out of over 70,000 school teachers in the state of Missouri. Our school teachers start out with an average pay of $32,000. Most have master's degrees, and the average pay with a master's degree in the people that reach our children every day is only $47,000.
Cassie?
I would argue and say Governor Parson. He's officially been governor longer than Greitens this week. So I think he's winning.
Scott will certainly appreciate that. I think we all can attest to that.
I would say Parson.
And I'd like to give a nod to the Tilley and Wolf family. Steve Tilley's mother passed away unexpectedly last week. She was laid to rest. Steve often described her as his hero, and I know she'll be missed by all those who knew her. This has been another episode of This Week in Missouri Politics. I'm Brittany Robbins, filling in for Scott Vaughn, and he will be back next week.
This Week in Missouri Politics, sponsored by the Missouri Association of Career Fire Protection Districts, Spire, and Sterling Bank.
We just finished up this week's show, and I appreciate a second to tell you about a new thing we're doing. I'm a history buff, like I know a lot of you are if you watch the show. We're doing a thing of the history of Missouri. We're going to do it one county at a time. We call it Show Me Missouri. We're going to travel to all 114 counties of the state. We'll have a member of the Farm Bureau, county elected officials, some of your state legislators you see here on the show. We're going to talk about the history, what's happening now in the county, and how the two are interconnected. It's a passion project of mine. If you like history, I hope you'll get involved. Follow us. Go to MissouriTimes.com. You can see it. We'll probably branch it off into its own social media at some point. But you've been so good to us at the Missouri Times, the show, different papers. This is a passion project that I hope you'll enjoy. It's called Show Me Missouri. The history of Missouri, one county at a time. The first county was Polk County. We had a great time. And we hope you'll go to MissouriTimes.com, find a little bit about it. And if you like the history of the state, I hope you'll enjoy it. Thanks a lot.